Imagine standing right at the base of a towering 60-foot earthwork pyramid.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's this massive, geometrically perfect structure, and it was built centuries before Columbus ever even thought about setting sail.
Right, right.
And it was built entirely by hand, like no beasts of burden, no wheel, just millions of individual baskets of earth carried by citizens over, generations.
Incredible to think about.
It really is. But then imagine that exact same civilization, the people who built it, who thrived around it for thousands of years, just being legally erased from the map by the stroke of a pen in some Washington, D.C. office.
Yeah, it is a profoundly jarring contrast. And it completely shatters the way we usually consume history, right? Because we like our history to be easily digestible.
Oh, for sure. We want it neat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially when we're trying to quickly grasp the narrative of a specific place.
When you open a standard history textbook, looking for a timeline, there is this expectation of clean geometry, a straight line right across the page. There's a date, a dot, a sentence about some event, and then you just move neatly to the next dot. It feels so tidy, You read about a civilization here, a treaty there. It's safe, it's distant.
But that clean geometry completely masks the messy, overlapping reality of human existence. I mean, when you rely on those tidy little dots, you completely miss the mechanics of how entire worlds are built.
Right.
And, more importantly, exactly how they're dismantled.
Exactly. And when you step into the true historical landscape of a place like Mississippi, that tidy timeline just shatters.
It really does.
We are looking at a historical reality that is so incredibly deep, so complex, and ultimately so disruptive to the standard narrative that a simple straight line just cannot hold it. So welcome to our deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, our mission is to build a better timeline for you. We are going to look at the Native American cultures in the region that eventually became Mississippi, stretching from the end of the last ice age all the way through their systematic displacement in the 1830s.
Yeah, and we are doing this with a very specific goal in mind. We want to unpack the historical impact of the Indian Removal Act.
Yes.
But specifically framing it in a way that helps students of history, and really anyone trying to understand the American story, truly grasp the gravity and the actual mechanics of this displacement.
Because it wasn't just a sudden single event on a timeline.
No, not at all.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand what was lost during the displacement of the 1830s, we have to first understand the sheer immense depth of history that existed in that region long before European contact.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we're talking about going way back.
We are. Following the end of the Pleistocene age, so the last Ice Age Paleo-Indians arrived in what we now call the American South.
Right.
And these were nomadic hunter-gatherers. Their entire way of life was predicated on pursuing the megafauna.
The giant animals.
Exactly, those massive, now extinct animals like mastodons.
So we're talking about a landscape that looks completely different and a society purely based on movement. But they didn't stay nomadic forever, right?
Yeah. No, they didn't. As the climate warmed and those megafaunas died out, they had to pivot.
Which makes sense.
Right. And this is where we see the emergence of the mound builders over 2,000 years ago. Specifically, the Troyville, Coles Creek, and Plaquemine cultures located in western Mississippi along the river.
But I want to pause here for a second because we throw the term mound builder around a lot.
We do.
But to actually execute this, to stop wandering and build massive earthwork structures, I mean, that requires a massive leap. It's like upgrading from a tent to a skyscraper.
That's a great way to put it.
It highlights the incredible engineering and societal organization required.
Yeah.
But how did these isolated cultures evolve and interact?
Well, what's fascinating here is that these weren't static societies. They evolved based on environmental changes and interactions with neighboring groups, laying the groundwork for some really complex trade networks.
Right, they were constantly adapting.
Exactly. It wasn't just piling dirt. You need an agricultural surplus to feed the workers. You need a highly organized social hierarchy to direct the labor.
Because you're moving tons of earth, right?
Yeah.
50 pounds at a time, basket by basket.
Yes. And you need architectural knowledge to ensure a 50-foot mound of dirt doesn't just wash away in the first major rainstorm.
Oh, true.
They were using different colors and textures of clay and soil, essentially engineering the internal structure for maximum stability.
It's brilliant. And so these mounds didn't just stay isolated monuments.
No.
They became the epicenter of a massive cultural exchange that shaped the specific tribes we recognize in the historical texts later on.
Precisely. The Mississippi River was the main artery of North America.
Like a superhighway.
Exactly like a superhighway. And during the terminal Coles Creek period, which is roughly between 1150 and 1250 CE, contact increased dramatically.
With who?
With the massive Mississippian cultures centered way upriver near present-day St. Louis.
Oh.
And this brought new pottery techniques, new ceremonial objects, and entirely new social structures down the river.
I read about the pottery, actually. The shell-tempered pottery.
Yes, grinding up mussel shells from the river and mixing it into the clay. It makes the pottery significantly stronger and allows the walls to be much thinner.
Which means you can process food more efficiently, particularly maize, and that supports massive population growth.
Exactly. It was a technological and cultural revolution, but, it wasn't uniform. The Plaquemine culture actually shrank after 1350 CE.
Interesting.
Yeah, though the Tien Natchez tribes held out in the Natchez Bluffs, continuing their ancestral traditions.
Wait, so it wasn't just one static Native American culture.
Not at all.
It was more like an ancient, bustling cultural exchange program with holdouts and early adopters.
That is exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Long before Europeans arrived, the continent was dynamic and deeply interconnected. Meanwhile, groups speaking Tunican, Chittamakan, and Muskogean actively absorbed that Mississippian influence.
And they eventually became the historic Chickasaw and Choctaw peoples, right?
Yes, alongside the Yazoo, the Pascagoula, and the Biloxi. And this complexity is crucial for you, the listener, to grasp, because it really humanizes the civilizations that would later be targeted by federal policy.
Right. They weren't just names on a page. They were bustling, evolving societies.
Exactly.
So having established this rich, deep history of these tribes, we have to pivot to the catalyst for their displacement.
The economic shift.
Yeah, a technological invention that changed the economic landscape forever. Because initially, it wasn't all outright hostility from the Americans, right?
No, it wasn't. In the early years, you had figures like Governor William C.C. Claiborne from 1801 to 1803.
He was the governor of the Mississippi Territory, right?
Right. And he attempted conciliation. He actually tried to improve the material well-being of Native Americans. He even coordinated mass smallpox vaccinations for them.
Wow, so there was at least some attempt at diplomacy and coexistence.
It was. But then the invention of the cotton gin happened.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I like to compare the cotton gin to pouring an accelerant on a fire.
Oh, absolutely.
Because suddenly, the cultivation of short staple cotton became highly profitable in the upland areas of the South.
Right. Before the gin, it took a whole day to separate the seeds from just 1 pound of short staple cotton by hand. It wasn't worth it.
But Eli Whitney's machine mechanizes it, and suddenly one machine can clean 50 pounds a day.
And the economics completely flipped overnight.
Exactly. Suddenly, land that was respected as ancestral territory became viewed purely as a high-yield financial asset.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can really see the shift from diplomacy to outright aggression. The economic pressure from the international cotton market just completely overwhelmed those early attempts at peaceful coexistence.
Because the Industrial Revolution in Europe was starving for raw cotton?
Yes. And to feed that demand, a massive influx of American migrants from the Upper South poured into the territory from 1798 to 1820.
Bringing enslaved labor with them.
Yes, bringing enslaved labor and just an insatiable demand for land.
So the diplomatic approach vanishes. But the economic demand for cottonland didn't just result in an overnight war, did it?
No.
It resulted in a systematic, bureaucratic dismantling of Native American territory.
That's a perfect way to describe it. The U.S. government used treaties to slice away the land, just piece by piece, from 1801 to 1830.
Can you give some examples of that scale?
Sure. The 1801 Treaty of Fort Adams took 2.6 million acres from the Choctaw, just for the Natchez Trace.
2.6 million, wow.
Then the 1820 Treaty of Dokestan took 5.1 million acres in exchange for a parcel way out in Arkansas.
Just staggering amounts of land.
And it kept going. The 1832 Treaty of Pontotoc with the Chickasaw took 6.2 million acres, forcing them to seek a home in the West.
When we look at millions of acres changing hands, what did this actually look like for the people signing these papers? I mean, was it a fair negotiation or a bureaucratic ultimatum?
Oh, it was an ultimatum. It was a crushing weight. The government used trading posts to get tribal leaders deep into debt they could never repay through the deer skin trade.
Ah, so it was a debt trap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A predatory debt trap. Once the debt was insurmountable, the government demanded land as the only payment. Displacement was this slow, legalistic squeezing of the tribes.
Pushing them further and further west.
Right, pushing them west and isolating them from the rapidly growing white and enslaved populations, basically setting the stage for the final blow.
Which brings us to the climax of this timeline. The decades of piecemeal treaties culminated in a sweeping federal mandate that permanently altered the demographic and physical landscape of the United States.
The Indian Removal Act.
Passed in 1830 by the federal government.
Yes, and that directly led to the 1830 Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek.
Which was just devastating.
Completely devastating.
Yeah.
That single treaty took a staggering 10.5 million acres from the Choctaw. It forced their removal while technically granting U.S. citizenship to the very few who remained.
Though that citizenship didn't actually protect them from local hostility.
Not at all. And those 10.5 million ceded acres were immediately sold off by the state.
Fueling the expansion of the plantation economy.
Exactly, and fueling the massive forced domestic migration of enslaved African Americans into the Deep South to work that very land.
So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at it, it's like clear-cutting an ancient forest just to build a factory.
That's a stark analogy, but it's very accurate.
An entire cultural ecosystem, thousands of years old, was forcibly uprooted and replaced by this rigid, industrialized agricultural machine.
And this raises an important question, particularly regarding how students learn history today.
How so?
Well, the Indian Removal Act shouldn't just be taught as a single date on a timeline for a multiple-choice test.
Right, like 1830, memorize it and move on.
Exactly. It needs to be understood as a total economic, demographic, and spatial re-engineering of the American South. The displacement of Native Americans was directly, mechanically linked to the expansion of American slavery. They are the same story.
You literally cannot untangle them. The immense wealth of the cotton economy was built directly on top of the lands acquired through the bureaucratic removal of these ancient cultures.
Precisely. One highly complex society was removed, so another, built on forced labor, could take its place.
It's a heavy, profoundly interconnected timeline.
It really is.
So let's just briefly recap the journey we've taken you on today.
Sounds good.
We started with the Ice Age megafauna hunters adapting to a changing climate, which led to the sophisticated mound builders upgrading from a tent to a skyscraper, as we said.
Right.
We looked at the massive cultural exchanges along the river and then the devastating impact of the cotton gin.
The accelerant on the fire.
Exactly. And finally, the bureaucratic finality of the Indian Removal Act, driven by predatory debt and an insatiable demand for land.
It's a lot to process. But I want to leave you with the final lingering thought to mull over.
Okay, what is it?
When you learn history from a textbook, it's really easy to view displacement as an erasure, as if the people and their history were just wiped clean off the map.
Right.
But today, many of those earthwork mounds that were built thousands of years ago are still standing in Mississippi.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They are these silent witnesses that somehow survived the arrival of the massive cotton fields and even the modern highways.
Just hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. So what does it mean that the physical landscape itself still bears the architectural fingerprints of the very people the government tried so hard to remove?
It really makes you reconsider the ground you walk on. The timeline isn't just a straight line in a book. It's physically built into the earth.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive.